So welcome everyone to this evening's LGFA Coach Education webinar. I'm joined by my colleague Garrod Balfrey. Garrod, would you like to say hello?
Good evening, everyone. How are we? I'm delighted to be on now with everyone this evening.
Good stuff. My name is Will Harmon and I'm Head of Coach Education for Ladies Football. And tonight's webinar is Coach Analysis, how it influences our coaching approach and training pitch ideas. So hopefully you'll take something from tonight. We're really looking forward to this webinar and we'll take it from here. So tonight, I suppose, it's influenced by two pieces of LGFA research. The first one being in conjunction with Performer Sports, our colleague Joe Turley there, looking at how coaches behave in practice. And that's really through our Learn to Lead program, which is our female leadership program that we work with coaches over a number of months. And also from our under 17 player development program, in-game analysis. And we're very grateful to Glenn Kelly of TUD in Dublin for assistance with that analysis regarding our player development program. So I suppose, Gerard, we'll start away with our first analysis, which is our Performer Sports and our Learn to Lead program. And if you see here, everyone, we've worked over 2 years. Now we're actually in our third year of this analysis, which the analysis will be coming through in the next few weeks. So we worked with, I suppose, over 11 coaches. We have 9 of them being with underage teams from under 14 to 19, or under 12 to 19, shall I say, and also 2 coaches who were involved with adult teams. We did in total 39 coaching observations, whereby we had a camera on the coach for those sessions. 9 of them were matches, and 30 of them were coaching sessions. So really interesting to share with you the feedback from that analysis, and we're really excited to see the new analysis that will be come on stream in the next few weeks. Also, we got an opportunity to listen to the player's voice and listen to how the players feel, I suppose, their coaches interacted and engaged in sessions. So hopefully this will really help you going forward with your coaching approach and behavior. But I suppose, Garo, the first time we highlight is that, 80% of coaches have low self-awareness of their behavior. And I want you to think and reflect on that at the moment, coaches listening in. How aware are you of your own behavior as a coach? But more importantly, 8% of players are acutely aware of your behavior. So think about that for a second. Are you aware of your own coaching behavior? But you've got to realize that your players are very much aware of how you behave. So it's just something to be, I suppose, the first learning nugget of tonight. I suppose, Garrod, it's something to be, I suppose, cognizant of from a coaching perspective, in terms of the self-awareness of our own coaching approach.
Yeah, I think just initially, without delving too much into it, because we will go into different aspects of this, is should there be a disparity between the two? Ideally not. And then looking at that 80% in front of us, that's quite a substantial gap, isn't it?
It is huge. It is huge, Garrod. And I suppose for everyone here is, are you aware of your own behavior? And how do we improve that? How can we, develop that? Do we get people to observe our sessions? Come here, Garrod, will you come down and watch me today? And just observe me in these various things. How much do I talk, or silence, or interact with players, or smile, or have humor? And do we ask our players for feedback? And how often do we ask our players for feedback? So think about that. Think about, do we get people to observe us? And also, how often do we actually get players to give us their feedback after the sessions? How do you enjoy tonight? What can I improve as a coach? What do you like as in me as a coach? Okay, so just something to be very much aware of. And I think that's a very valid point you made, Garrod. Should there be a disparity? I don't know. I guess there shouldn't really be, if that makes sense. So okay, let's look at. I'm going to only touch on 2 or 3 of these. And you can read more on these in your own time. It's on our LGFA YouTube channel, or LGFA website, which I'll show you in a few minutes where you can access that. But the top findings is we as coaches in our sessions, so think about your training sessions or even games. In particular, let's look at training sessions at the moment. Over nearly 60% of time we're instructing. That's where we're talking, guiding, instructing, telling players what to do, where to go, how to go about their business. And only about 8% of that is questioning. So think about that now. So think about, how that is, if you were to get someone to observe your sessions, what would that look like? So coach leading, directing, players just following. So what are we trying to achieve here? Are we trying to bring that instruction down a small bit and try and increase our questioning, which now we have a bit more engagement interaction? And that's just something I suppose, Garrod, we need to be aware of, really, is that can we even reduce that instruction style and probably get a bit more questioning into our sessions? I suppose that's something that we just be cognizant of in our first learning, really.
Yeah, and it's very much What is the benefit of that? We were kind of traditionally always brought up to instruct, to guide, to be that leading light within a coaching session or a scenario. But what are the benefits of questioning your players? What are those? I'd love to know your thoughts, even in the chat. What do you think are the benefits of questioning over instructing or telling constantly within your sessions?
And also, Garrod, and I would say here, if for just a small bit of a tip while people write the chat function is, do we ever think about the questions we want to ask our players? So if you're doing a drill or an activity, and you want to stop it after a minute or so, do we think about the questions we want to pose to our players? Do we think of how we're going to set that up? Do we get them to small groups? Do we ask an open group? Do we get the girls to conflab themselves and talk about it? So think about that. Do we actually plan that? So just something I think to be aware of in terms of, I suppose, engagement, interaction with our players. So our behaviors, how can we improve our behavior and interaction with our players? Then possibly just bring down that instruction and possibly increase that questioning side of things. And I'll just show an example here. In the green is Emily Martin. Emily Martin is a head of coach education with myself. She's a coach, national development officer, coach education, but also she's a Gaelic for Teens ambassador. And we videoed one of Emily's sessions. But give a look at here. So let's see how it compares and contrasts to the Learn to Lead program or female leadership program. And look at it. So Emily's instructional style was 31%. That's nearly half of what we noticed through the Learn to Lead program. But look at her questioning was up 23%. Also, another thing to observe is how much she was silent and observing. She was observing players. So she was 12%, where our Learn to Lead participants were 1%, 4%. So think about that session. Think about how that coach is behaving and interacting with her players. So she's doing less talking, she's doing more observing, and she's getting more engagement from her players. Garrod, I think that's very interesting to see that different dynamic, and I suppose how that engagement interaction of players could probably develop. In the chat function, tell us what your thoughts are. Is it something you can relate to? Garrod, talk to me.
Yeah, no, some very good points there as well, and further rationale around this research and these results that people are saying giving the feedback is so important. You're giving autonomy to the players. You're giving them more questioning, more understanding, makes them more adaptable as players. They're problem solving and everything. So it's absolutely true. Those are all the benefits of asking more open questions, helping guide your players towards the answers instead of giving them the answers constantly. It makes them more confident, more competent as a player, and then they enjoy that scenario much, much more than they would if they're afraid to do the wrong thing or make a mistake.
And I would say there, Garrod, and everybody think about this. I think we're all aware of that. I think looking at this, you can probably all relate to it. But in practice, are we doing what we would like to do? So do we revert to type? So I would say is start practicing, start writing down your questions, start thinking about, even getting people to observe you, and start, I suppose, just be more conscious of that. Because if you do decrease that instruction, increase your questioning, and probably have a bit more observing going on, then going back to the point one of you made is that you can now give more meaningful feedback because now you're more aware of what's going on around you. So just something to be, I suppose, be cognizant of, really, is what we're saying. So what are the other things? And this goes back to the feedback we ask players. Well, what way would you like feedback? So think of this as a coach in your behavior and your approach. And 48% nearly said, I like when the coach tells me, that's an instruction. I like when they show me, which is good demonstration. I like when they let me try it. So off you go, give it a go. But then I like when they come back and give me that, what do they think? Or ask me, tell me, how do you find that? What can we do differently? How can we improve? And think about your own coaching at this present time. Where are you on that graph? Are you a coach that instructs and tells all the time? Are you a coach that tells and demos well? Are you a coach that tells, shows, and let them at it? But are you the coach that brings that extra nugget whereby now you're actually engaging with the players? Now tell me, what do you think of that? How can you improve it? And I think, Garrod, there's different levels of feedback. And I think that real meaningful engagement interaction is at 48%. That's what players are looking for. That's what they're telling us. That's what they want. So I think that's something that as coaches, we just need to be cognizant of, but also think about your own coaching at present And where are you in this graph? And where would you like to get to? And I suppose that might help you with improving you as a coach. Gearóid, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and it's basically challenge yourself as a coach, because there's no one size fits all in relation to questioning, and we're not saying okay, leave them come up with all of the answers, because there are different players with different abilities. So you identify that, but wherever possible, it is looking to challenge yourself. How you get them to come up with the information? How do
Exactly.
you get them? If it's small groups, if it's individually, different challenges, how you get them to come up with the answers, solutions, start problem solving for themselves wherever possible. Certain problems might be tougher than others, but of course, you have every right then as well to help and guide and give as much information to help those who need it as well.
Exactly. And everybody, you're probably all involved with different age groups, all the different stage of development, and you know your players. But I would say start this as a habit really early. So even with younger players, asking me a question, well, tell me, how do you pick up the ball? Tell me, how do you improve it? I guarantee you they'll give you the answer. An 8-year-old will give you the answer. But if we don't start that habit really, really early about, engage them and ask them simple questions relative to their stage of development, then they won't become players that would probably think for themselves and be more creative. And that's what we're trying to achieve. So we hope this analysis is helping. In the chat function, tell us what your thoughts so far. Is it relative? Is it something that you can, I suppose, relate to? Please share your thoughts as we move along the webinar. So we're going to move it on in terms of, we looked at the top 5 states by time in terms of across that, 30 coaching sessions and 9 matches. But in the coaching sessions in particular, one of the biggest stat was, how inactive players are in our sessions. For 22% of the time, players are non-active. That's where they're not doing an activity or engaging. They're just not active. I think that's something that we need to be very cognizant of. Can you imagine if you have an hour with your players and for 20% of that time, they're not doing anything. They're not engaging. They're not talking. They're not even involved in an activity. And I think that's a really, really, really interesting stat. And for us as coaches, we need to be very mindful of our planning, of our efficiency in our delivery. And I just think that's just something that was really stand out to us. Obviously, there's other things there, guys, in terms of we do play a lot of games, a lot in terms of full-sided games. But maybe the benefit of a small-sided and working on our skills. Look at the percentages across, 30 odd sessions. So something just for us to be cognizant of in terms of our approach and our behavior, in terms of how we deliver our sessions, is that, okay, well, how do we keep players active and engaged? And engaged could be talking to each other, problem solving. Engaged could be engaging with the players in a conversation. But non-active, where they're doing absolutely zero, is something that maybe we can be really, really think about as coaches. And I just think that's why we're not aware of our own behavior. Can you imagine if someone observed us and just timed, what we did in each activity and timed how active the players are? It'd be very interesting to get that feedback. Gearóid, thoughts, and everybody in the chat function, tell us what your thoughts are. Is it something that you're aware of? Is it something that you're not surprised by? But please, in the chat function, let us know. Gearóid.
Yeah, I think it's something a lot of people mightn't be aware of something that was going to be discussed this evening when we cover this type of a topic. But it stems from, how do you get your players to do what you're looking for them to do out on the pitch? And if they're not engaging in everything you're looking to set up, and the majority of the time they're not doing it, that means you may not be giving them sufficient time to learn the skills or the pattern of play of whatever you're trying to implement in that session. And that paired all the way back, that comes back to just organization, logistics. Okay, being aware that you're not wasting the time that you do have with that team.
Exactly. So think about that. So again, guys, it goes back to just being self-aware of how we approach our training. And this is coach analysis, not performance analysis. This is analyzing ourselves as coaches and how can we improve and develop. I think it's really powerful stuff. And, it's really good stuff, I think, from a coach's perspective to understand, I suppose, the impact of our coaching could have in terms of the learning environment for our players. So the final bit of this, research, and we move on to our second research, is in terms of in games, of the 9 games that we looked at. Wow, our instruction was 82%, and that's in play. So as the game is going on, we're up and down the sideline, go here, go there, pass the ball to Mary, pass the ball to Sheila, go back, go forward. So we're very vocal on the sideline as coaches. 82% in 9 games that we videoed, where there's a lot of instruction going on. questioning was very low, but actually in one game, questioning was higher than other games, but that was in a challenge match, which is interesting. So the coach felt that in a challenge match, okay, I can now maybe less pressure on me. I can now probably ask players, for their thoughts and their feedback, maybe be pre-game or at halftime or during the game. Okay, so as I say, this is interesting. So think about yourself currently. Look at the silence, it's very low. Look at the humor, even that's where you interact and smile with your players. But look at the silence and look at the instruction. So the question I would ask as coaches is how much are we actually watching what's in front of us? And how are we able to give meaningful feedback to our players at the vital time, which is probably only 5 or 6 minutes at halftime, or maybe before the game, if we're really involved in the games? So think about that for you as a coach. What kind of coach are you? Are you the coach that stands back and observes? Are you the coach up and down the sideline constantly instructing our players? And think about that environment you're creating. I suppose, Garrod, it's a very interesting one. I suppose a lot of coaches could relate to this one as well. Again, in the chat function, love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, and I think everyone maybe smiled a small bit when they saw 82% and kind of understood that all of a sudden when it becomes a bit competitive, that we feel like we're allowed to reach that status. But it is also, like we mentioned, reflecting on you as a coach and what benefit it has for your team if you're acting in that way. So what it might mean or might tell me when I see a coach roaring throughout a match is going, how well did they prepare? What did they do in training? And why is what they're doing in training not transferring onto the pitch? So it could be, is everything that I'm planning to do in my session, is it game-based enough? Is it relevant to what we're looking to set up? Other than that, why am I trying to put out fires all over the place? Why am I trying to help Breda get from cornerback, bring her up the field, help her pass the ball solo, and tell her everything to do? So it's basically going, I would always reflect on people, and sometimes it's efficient, it's good information, good feedback that you're giving, brilliant. But if you're trying to put out fires all over the place, I would always look back and going, how can I avoid this happening on game day?
Yeah. And I think Carol, with that, and a little tip for people is start practicing in your training, whereby if you are playing your small sided games, then you stand back and just be silent, just observe and give that nugget information when required. So start practicing that in your training. Start practicing that standing back, observing, being silent. And it will help you then on game day, because then you'll be more clear on what you're looking for and be more clarity in terms of your feedback. I think, Gerald, coaches need to probably practice that more.
It's a confidence thing as a coach.
Yeah.
It's a confidence thing, and you just need to trust your team as well. And that trust comes from training relevant to how you want to set up and play on those days.
It comes back to being comfortable in your own skin as a coach in terms of what you're doing. And I suppose, and that comes back to training everyone. These are just behaviors that we want you to be aware of and that they're very cognizant of. And so therefore, then maybe next time you go on the training pitch, you just, they might say, okay, tonight, I might just stand back a bit more, maybe just be observant. So let's see what I learn and how can I give more meaningful feedback. Okay, so before we move on to the next analysis, please in the chat function. So that's very much about our coaching behavior. There's loads more on that. We actually have the 2 years report on the LGFA website, and I'll show you how to get that later on. To read up on it. And we're looking forward to the third iteration of the results in a few weeks' time from Joe Turley. Really looking forward to that and seeing, okay, well, are we similar results, or have they improved or not so, whatever. So in the chat function, tell us what's your thoughts. And before we move on to the second part of the show, which is more on in the game and analyzing stuff in the game. So, Garrod, I suppose, what's the biggest learning for you while people come into the chat function there? What's the biggest learning for you, or what would be the biggest, I suppose, takeaway for you in that section?
Well, from the first section is basically, and I always say it, I think there's hundreds, if not thousands, of fantastic coaches who have fantastic plans, fantastic ideas, but they can't implement them. And how do you implement them with your team? So it is true being an effective communicator, through creating that level of understanding between you and your players. Not only telling them what to do, but everyone on the same page of understanding why they're doing it. Okay, so that's how you will get buy-in to and as I said, there are so many fantastic coaches, fantastic plans, so many plans that will get you a county final and All-Ireland final, but it is the coaches who are able to implement them with their teams through effective communication, through understanding, and that buy-in, and what I like to say, interdependency between the coach and the players. That's where the key is.
Thanks. So everyone, I hope you enjoyed that. So my key takeaway is if we can reduce the telling and improve our questioning, it'll increase the interaction between ourselves and the players. But also my takeaway is that I need to start planning my questions. What are the questions I'm going to ask? And that they're not closed questions, they're open questions like tell me, explain, describe, and those verbs are vitally important. And the other thing I took away from that analysis was we just need to be more observant, a bit more silent, a bit more, and observe what we see in front of us, which will allow us then to give a bit more meaningful feedback. So we need to know what we're looking for first, observe it, and then give meaningful feedback. So I hope that helps. Before we move on, Garrod, is there anything in the chat that you want to kind of highlight before we move on?
Just a few. I do stats for the adult ladies, so she doesn't get involved with the emotion of the game and just gets to see the players in terms of players and teams and tactics. So it gets to step back and view from that position on the sideline, which is a great way to learn. Absolutely. So you're not getting involved or distracted with anything else. Would you say the changes with what level the girls are at?
Yeah, interesting. So you're probably talking about different age groups and different stages of development. Of course, maybe at the younger age groups, you're probably a bit more instructional. But I would say you can still practice questioning. So I've coached underage myself. I've coached under 8s. I've coached under 10s. I've coached under 12s. But I'd be very much around the same approach, similar approach in terms I want my engagement with the players. So instead of telling them the answer, I always try to ask a question to get them to see can they give me the answer. So I think it can be applied at all age groups, but it's vitally important that you understand the stage of development and knowing your players as well. But I think there's no harm if you start that, shall I say, approach early. But I definitely think we need to probably just reduce that telling and instructional style to a bit more open question style, and just even reduce the percentages. And I think if we do that, I think we'd do a lot better as coaches. Okay, so we move it on, guys, to the second section of tonight. And tonight now is different. So that was more about our coaching behavior and how we as coaches interact and communicate. This is about our actual analysis of the game. Okay, so hopefully now you'll enjoy this. So what we did here was we analyzed 10 games in the 2022 Player Development Program in the Festival Day in the National Games Development Centre in Blanchardstown, Abbottstown. And we did 20 games. So it's about 200 minutes of football that we observed. Now, we were very clear in our analysis of what we were looking for. So we were very clear I suppose, in terms of what we were looking for from the stats. So hence why we got very much clarity in terms of what we provide here. But again, guys, we're just showing stuff, a few snippets. There's a lot more involved here that we can share with you as well post-webinar. So here, this is interesting. So as coaches, something to be very, very conscious of turnovers where players surrendered possession. The biggest turnover, the one of the skills whereby let a lot of players down was the kick pass. 40% of the time where a team turned over possession was from a kick pass. That's interesting. And can you relate it to everyone? Everyone, can you relate to that? So our kicking. So it was the skill that led to the most turnovers. In other words, what I mean by that is that where we lost the ball or we lost possession of the ball was kicking, which was interesting. But even furthermore than that, well, why? So we need to ask ourselves why. Why was it kicking was the main issue? 46% of the time was technical execution, so how they executed the skill. Some is just misplaced. Some they rushed it after receiving the ball. So they got the ball and they just want to get rid of it. So just kicked it anywhere. And some was technical error. So they weren't keeping their eye on the ball. They maybe lifted their head at the wrong time. They probably didn't drop the ball with the hand that they were kicking with. They probably didn't follow through for distance and accuracy. But another one was kicking the ball into congestion or to a player being tracked. So it's like me kicking the ball to Garrod, but it's a straight kick. So Garrod has a marker behind him. And I kick the ball straight to Garrod and the player comes in and wins the ball off. That was 40% of the time. So can you relate to this, everyone? It's just for a coaching in terms of our sessions, it's just something to be very conscious of. We need to practice kicking, I suppose, under pressure, practice kicking into space. But look at the big one here. 39% of the time, kick passes were given away from a dead ball scenario. So that might be where the ball goes over the sideline. There's no one marking the girl and she just kicks it away. It could be where a girl gets it free in the middle of the park. She gets the ball and she kicks it away. And it's 9 times where they try and get rid of the ball as fast as possible. So think about that in your training sessions. Getting girls to be more composed, probably where, how to kick the ball in terms of skill execution. Where does she need to kick the ball to get 60-40 to your forward? Okay, what are the runs like from the receiver? There's so much involved here regarding this. But it just was very, very interesting. And please, can you relate to that, everyone? Kicking in ladies football, in particular this under 17 age group, was a difficulty. It's where a lot of times we got the ball. So think about our sessions. What are we doing in our sessions? What are we practicing in our sessions? How are the girls practicing their skills? Are they opposed, semi-opposed, unopposed even? Can we get it right unopposed? Then we go semi-opposed, then we go opposed. Garrod, what's your thoughts on this? I thought it was very interesting. Everybody in the chat function, please share your thoughts.
Yeah, it just shows that something that I think we presume after years of playing football is kind of a given. But it shows that at all stages of development, you can't take your eye off the key skills of the game. And it's also then, if you have refined those key skills, how are you utilizing them? Like you mentioned, are we getting them into space? What are we doing with these balls, with these kick passes? And it's like, do our players understand what they're looking to achieve?
But also, too, I suppose, in our sessions, Garrod, we just have to think of our activities we're doing, the activities that we're playing. So I would be very big advocate of small-sided games with big spaces. So if I want to really improve kicking, then I'd have a small-sided, maybe 4v4, 5v4 in a big, large space and promote kicking of the ball. If you see in previous webinars, we had 1 or 2 activities where there was 2 ball, 5v5 in a large space. Promote kicking of the ball. And it's okay to make mistakes, but it's very important the feedback we give. So let's go back to our original stats. What feedback are we giving players? In terms of the technical execution or demonstrations, and giving feedback to players in terms of where we're kicking the ball, the importance of being composed. And what I noticed a lot from this is that girls want to get rid of the ball as quickly as possible. So we need to get girls really comfortable with the ball. So therefore, how many touches of the ball are our players getting in our sessions? So the more touches, the more comfortable you get the ball. So therefore, then we might see a reduction in this sort of probably skill execution. Guys, share your thoughts in the chat function. Agree, disagree. We hope this analysis is really going to assist.
Very good point by Dan as well. And the same point. It's 2 linear drills going from cone to cone. And that's exactly right. How many cones will you see in the pitch in a weekend? None. So how are you making your kicking practice dynamic to match what you want them to do on the pitch?
Exactly. So get rid of the cones, get rid of the lines. Can they practice in 2s? Just, moving left, moving right, kicking to space. It's the same thing, but it's applicable to the game. I don't see any player kicking from one corner to the other in a game. So let's give them all a ball, working 2s, kicking dynamically, kicking off your left, kicking off your right, and getting used to that, getting used to kicking off the instep, kicking off the punt kick. So yeah, Dan, I agree with you. I suppose it's just thinking differently about how our activities. Okay, so if you're going to kick linear, therefore it's going to be linear, and therefore, if there's a marker behind me, that's very easy for a player to knock the ball away. So even kicking the ball to the left, to the right of the player, or even the angle of the run of the receiver is vitally important. So there's loads of things come into this, but I think the biggest thing is being comfortable with the football, being composed on the ball, and trusting your skill and your skill development in terms of executing the skill. Look, there's loads of ways of looking at it, but hopefully that helps.
Other feedback then was just it's vastly undertaught as a skill as you progress, I think, especially with the older age groups. And then I think someone else mentioned last year lost twice as a result of too many turnovers from kick passes and hand passes. So that was an interesting feedback there as well.
The team that has a high skill level will have a higher chance of winning the game. But how often do we practice kicking in our sessions? Think about that, everyone. How often do we actually? Are we afraid because if we introduce kicking, or the ball's turned over, or Jesus, we'll make a fool of me as a coach and we're going to lose games? If you don't take the risk, you miss the chance. That's my biggest mantra. If you don't take the risk, you miss the chance. And for me, the ball travels faster as a kick pass. So I promote kicking. That's just me as a coach. You could be different. So kicking, you've got to promote it, but you need to be touching the ball a lot more. 4 footballs for 30 players, then I don't know you really develop your kicking. 25 footballs for 25 players, now that's a different story. So let's think about it. I want you to reflect on your own coaching, and let's think about that skill development and your practices and your activities. Is there something we can just tweak slightly there to probably get players more comfortable, but also executing the skills, even under pressure as well. But those kick passes, guys, were no one around them. Think about that. There was no pressure on the player. They were giveaways from no one around them. So come on, we can really work on that. Okay, here is giving away possession. So where are teams surrendering possession? And not surprisingly, it's in the attacking third. So you can probably think of that. Maybe what's happening is, and what we spotted in the analysis was, teams were moving the ball up the pitch and they probably kicked the ball into the third, but the kick pass wasn't great, so therefore it was turned over a lot more. And possibly the decision making maybe in that third wasn't where it should be. Again, that's players being comfortable with the ball and probably comfortable in their own decision making and probably the execution of the basic skills. Garrett, I don't know what your thoughts on that, but it was interesting that on the final third, where the important part of the pitch was where a lot of ball was being turned over. So again, thinking about our play, thinking about our strategies and our activities, what are we doing in our field of play to really work on these aspects? Garrett, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, and another thing that could come into this stat as well could be speed or transition. So how fast we're getting the ball up the pitch out of these areas. You see 6% in defence is because we do not want that ball hanging around our defence, even if it's from kick out or whatever it might be. So we are fantastic naturally at getting that ball out of that first third. But then it's usually a case of looking up, building the play, creating space, and maybe that's too long, or your players are taking too long to get set up to build up that counter attack or that transition in play. So very important then to realize in our sessions, okay, we might need to put a time limit on this. We might need to say, okay, you've got 30 seconds. That ball needs to be from A on one side of the pitch to B on the other side of the pitch. And that's our goal. So it gets your players to think going position-wise, getting them in positions off the ball to set up a quicker counter-attack as well, to get that ball and alleviate that pressure from those areas as well on the field.
But I actually think the next slide will probably give an answer to the reason why a lot of balls are turned over in the final third. And it's just very interesting. So we got players to probably look at where are our attacks originating from and where are our attacks going. I think this is very interesting. And I think this is probably one of the main reasons why the attack is turning over a lot on the attacking side. So give a look at it. Think about your own team. Think about other teams that you play in, particularly ladies football. Watch games on the TV. Watch the next game you watch in your club. Observe it. Where do teams attack? They attack in ladies football predominantly down the center. And if you're underage, you got 1 or 2 dominant players, they just go down the center, which I don't think we're developing if we're doing that, because when they get the girls who are probably the same ability level and stature, then they're going to really struggle. But look at here. It's either the right channel, the center channel. Look at the left channel, 7%. So think about that. Why is this happening? Why is this happening? And maybe there's a reason why the ball's been turned over an awful lot in the third, the attacking third for opposition, or for you as a team. Maybe it's because a lot of our players are very right-footed. So therefore they're always turning onto the right side. So if they're not going down the center, they're going down the right wing. And think about your team here. Maybe they get the ball in, around the center back area. They're turning into that zone there on the right hand side, and all the play. And then when a girl comes out of the zone, they go back into it again because they're very right side dominant. So now we need to look at this in terms of our coaching. Can we get our players to be very comfortable at both sides of the body? And if we're off both sides of the body, now maybe that player can have better spatial awareness and be able to switch the play. What's your thoughts on this? Very interesting. I think this is very interesting. I think if you observe your own sessions or even observe your next game you go to, I guarantee you'll see this going on. Very little play going on the left side because our players are very right-sided. So what are we doing in our sessions? Are we working that bilateral player where they're able to work and hand pass off both sides and kick off both sides of the body? If we can do that, then obviously we're going to have more play in terms of spatial awareness. Thoughts? Agree or disagree? Garrod, thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think it would shock too many people, this stat. I think as well as on top of the kicking, as well as much soloing on that side, carrying the ball to those sides. I think a lot of players might, if they're in the centre and spreading the ball to the left, they might go, I can use my preferred right foot for that. But are players who are receiving it still attacking down that side? They might be because they're using their right side to solo. So all it comes back to all those basic skills and how we are looking to implement them and how prominent they're going to be within our sessions. Do you want to limit your players and go, okay, they're very good on this side, they can make great decisions, but it's still, regardless, it limits them. So do we want to work on both sides, and how do we manage to do that? And it's not really a quick fix. It's more of a, how do you constantly utilize that or promote that within your sessions?
100%. So think about that, everyone. Obviously, skill development of both sides of the body, but also looking at the pitch from, okay, well, how do you play? To me, if I was marketing or the opposite coach of that team, it could be fairly easy to turn them over because we know where they're going to go. Okay, and just think about your own teams at the moment. So work on both sides, spreading that play. That those zones in your field, in your small side games, or even in your games, making sure they're aware that obviously switch the play. Don't go back to where the ball came from. Little things like that could help you with that. Okay, so just the last few slides here. Okay, if you're working on your shooting in your sessions, well, here's where LGFA under 17 players shoot, where they get success in their shooting. So as you see, it's very much around that D area. So when you're setting up your activities in your session, you can be just conscious of this. Where is the higher efficiency in terms of score ratio? So when you're setting up your various activities, then you'll have an idea of where that scoring zone is. So even having awareness of that will help you with in terms of your setup of your activities. So again, just you see there, guys, outside of the area, not too many girls can kick a point from outside of the area. Okay, at under 17 level. So again, it's just even increasing that range to get them to I suppose, more comfortable. And that comes back to your kicking ability and your ability to kick for distance. Okay, but also just for yourself having an awareness of where is the scoring zone, and when you're setting up your activities, well, what does that look like? Now you have a visual to see where you're at, and you can do this for your own team. There's no problem at all. You need a pen and paper and someone to mark. Put an X on a piece of paper on where your team is kicking from, and are they successful or not. There you have a visual that will help you when you're setting up your scoring activities. Garrod, I suppose it's just something to be aware of for coaches in terms of developing of their sessions.
Yeah, and it tends to be a confidence thing as well for a lot of players. So if you're afraid of making a mistake, or if you're not practicing it the whole time within your session, you are going to go for the closest option to avoid missing that shot within a game scenario. So it's how you build that confidence, bring it back, test your players from outside the areas. And then if you get more players being more confident shooting from outside those areas, running in all different directions, not just standing still, then that opportunity highlighted in green, that expands even more for you and your team. Now you've got more options across that final third of the pitch from which you can shoot and develop play from.
And also, everyone, look at the place balls. How many times we practice place balls? As you see where it's successful, where it's not so successful. So again, even just having a visual for your free takers of where the scoring zone is, where are we very comfortable in kicking from a place ball scenario, whether it be on the ground or off the hands. But also then, okay, we now know our range. When we know at the moment our percentage is very low at these key areas, then can we come up with a little set play that might increase that? So therefore, instead of going for the shot and driving it wide, can we come up with a quick set play that might increase our score efficiency? So just small things like that make a huge difference. I just think, I hope that kind of gives you guys an idea of the importance. And all you need is a pen and paper, marking off X, a circle for where you score from, and that visual can be very, very beneficial. Okay, so the final two slides in terms of is looking at the fouls. Well, where are fouls happening? And 157 fouls analyzed. The big thing for me was 86% of fouls by players over 200 minutes of football are personal fouls. That's a foul on the player. That's pulling out the arm. That's a dragging up the jersey. Personal fouls. 22% are technical. That's on the ball. So maybe pick the ball off the ground when both knees were not off the ground. Things like that. 80% were personal fouls. So think about that, everyone. How can we improve that in our training? Then we just work on our good tackling technique. We've done a webinar specifically on that. Good tackling, you'll have more of the ball. Poor tackling, you'll have less of the ball. And possibly you're giving the opposition even an opportunity to probably score as well. So work on good tackling. Our approach and our behavior as coaches will be determined by the information that's provided to us. We can ignore it and continue on and hope things will change, or we actually can take something from it and maybe might change one or two things from our coaching that might actually help improve. But 80% of the time was personal fouls. That's something we can influence. That's something we can do something about. Let's coach the girls to tackle well. Okay, so if we get tackling well, we win more of the ball back. Then we be composing the ball, we don't kick it away. Okay, so again, our skill execution is quite important. But most of the fouls were in the defensive area. So think of this now. We're now fouling a lot, and we're fouling a lot in the defensive area where we don't want to foul because they now have a shot on target. They now have a free shot, which now is more detrimental to us as a team. So all players need to be able to tackle well. You tackle well, you have more possession of the ball. So again, that analysis is probably from us, a coach perspective, we can probably improve that from our coaching, doing the activities appropriate to tackling well, but also give meaningful feedback to our players on what they need to do to probably tackle better. And we've done a webinar specific on that. Garrod, thoughts?
Yeah, and especially with tackling, it can come down to a few things. It can be feet are stuck for whatever reason. Maybe it's poor technique, or else maybe it's tiredness. You're unfit, so you're so tired, you're kind of stuck there. And what happens, instead of moving your feet with the player moves, and you're just reaching out, and you're trying to get in the way in whatever way possible. So, okay, if we're tired at the end of games, we need to work on our fitness. Okay, we need to work on technique. Are we also including when that ball is going to become available? When does it become available? Every 4 steps. Some fantastic teams, I can see them. I've been at inter-county games. I can see a defender counting. They're not saying it. They're not moving their mouth. I can tell they're counting because every 4 steps, that hand automatically extends out and that ball is there for them. So are you training them in line with the rules of the game as well?
I think it's a very good point. In line with the rules of the game. And I always say it's important to coach players in line with the rules of the game. That's vitally important. Yeah, but I just think tackling well is very important. But look at this. This is interesting. I just think these stats are very important. And even for yourself, as a coach, in terms of how we approach our training, these are just things to be aware of. And if girls know why you're doing what you're doing, they'll buy into it more and they'll even give it a bit more effort. Okay. How are players gaining possession? And this is interesting. A lot of players gain possession into the body, straight into the body. And think maybe that comes back to our activities earlier on, whereby a lot of stuff might be linear. So therefore it's coming directly to the body. But look at this one. I actually think it's very interesting. 18% of the times along the ground. I was at a game the weekend and one player got the ball and she kicked the ball around the ground to her teammate. So now her teammate had to bend down, pick up the ball, and actually she had made, I'd say, a yard or two on her opposition number. But by the time she bent down, picked up the ball and got up, the opposition defender was tackling her. So just again, it goes back to what are we like to coach our players? What is it we like to have our players be good at? So I would always pass the ball into space. If it's not directly into the body, into space. Okay, along the ground for me, I'd be saying, because they were losing those precious percentages because the player has to do X amount of actions to get the ball if it's along the ground. So just think about that. So what are we doing when we gain possession? I always coach with players to keep the head up and scan. So take your 4 steps and bounce. Take your 4 steps and bounce. Okay. So it's just this information is very, very interesting. So I just think it's interesting, Garrod, really, from a coaching perspective. These stats, they're very simplistic in nature, but they can have a huge impact if we apply them into in our training.
Yeah, and if you look at the most common ways of gaining possession, then you can see opportunities. What's right there at the very bottom, into space and a high ball. If you have a team who utilize space very, very well, then you're going to have an advantage on a lot of other teams. Also, if you're very good at fielding a high ball, then there are opportunities there for you to expose or to get the upper hand on other teams whose strengths may lay in other areas.
And I think this research here, Garrod, is very linked to the earlier research about the turnover and possession. Well, if we're very linear in our plays into the body, then there's probably a higher opportunity to get turned over. And playing that ball into space is less, so therefore your opportunity to turn over is higher because it's probably you look at the lanes in terms of where we move the ball from back to front. We're very narrow in our focus. Therefore, then our turnover possession is higher. It all interlinks. So we hope that really kind of gives you a bit of insight into in terms of your own coaching and your own activities, and think about it. Why are you doing what you're doing? And is what you're doing trying to promote even the few of the items that we're highlighting tonight? So, upon a gaining position, what do we under players? So I told you there, when players get the ball, I'd like my players to keep their head up, to scan, to use their 4 steps, okay, because they move quicker over the ground. But it's very interesting that a lot of players, look at this, under 17s, they actually want to get rid of the ball. So when they win the ball, they want to pass it off. They want to kick it. They want to get rid of it. So is it because they're not comfortable on the ball? Is it because that's probably an instruction from the coach? I don't know, but it's very interesting. 4 steps is high in the agenda, which is great to see, 31%. 21% is hop. Fumble and solo are lower down. But again, it goes back to, well, what way would you like your players to play? So it's just something to be very cognizant of. But if you want your players to have better awareness and scanning, then obviously 4-step hop would be what we promote. But if our players want to be more comfortable in the ball, but is that a reason why of a high turnover earlier on the stats? Because they want to get rid of the ball so quickly that maybe just a small bit more composure and a bit better in your execution, the skill and the receiver, then we might have hold on to the ball a bit more. So I think, Garrod, again, it's just something it's all interlinked, I think, really, Garrod, from the stats we saw that day.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the most positive ones when you see the 4 steps being so close to second. But also, again, you're looking at solo being, let's be honest, underutilized. And are we taking on players? Are we working in those ways as well? As you said, it's all dependent on how you want to set up as a team.
And very interesting, go back to the point you made earlier on, Garrod, and it says it there that, the build-up play. I remember we were saying that the turnovers and transition from the ball from back to front, you were saying we move the ball faster from the back than we do probably when we go probably higher up the field. But you see there, the build-up phase, 4 steps is utilized a lot. So what we're doing is we see our defenders coming out of the ball, we're using their 4 steps, so we're getting out of that defensive area fairly quickly. Then what's happening as we move up the field and we transition up the field, and then what we're noticing is a lot of ladies football is that transition is either central down the central channel, or it's down 2 channels rather than using that wider pitch. So everyone, we hope you enjoyed tonight. It's something different. Everybody will come on about performance analysis. Yes, there's an element of that, but coach analysis. So thinking about ourselves and as coaches and how we behave and interact, but also as coaches and what we're doing. Why do we do what we do in terms of our activities? And probably look at the bigger picture in terms of development of our players. If you go into the LGFA website and you go into the evaluations and papers section, all the research papers that we have around this are there for you to read in your own time. And there's a lot more. We just picked snippets out of it. Give a look at it. It really will influence your coaching approach and behavior. So thank you very much to Joe Hurley there in the performance sports. He's doing really good sport. Excellent work with our Learn to Lead. And then Glenn Kelly done excellent work there around, that benchmarking around elite ladies Gaelic football, and also with the player development analysis. So, we've done a lot more research, and everything that we do in our webinars is research informed. So it's vitally important. So in the chat function, tell us, what did you think of tonight? What did you take? What's your takeaway moment? What did you take away from tonight? And everybody, this webinar is recorded. It is available on our LGFA YouTube channel. Like all our other webinars, just go to the Coach Education playlist, and they're all there for you to view whenever you get an opportunity. Garrod, what's your key takeaway? And in the chat function, please, everyone, tell us what you thought of the webinar. Tell us what you took from the webinar, and we'll leave it at that.
The key thing is, well, basically, let us always be cognizant of what we are doing as coaches, how we are delivering what we're doing as coaches. And I hope ye as coaches now after this evening can take something away from this evening. You won't have all the answers, but hopefully it provokes a bit of thought into how you might want to update or change what you're currently doing or help improve your coaching setups in some way possible. So it'll be lovely to see how you might break down or maybe look at things differently in your clubs and in your coaching setups going forward.
And I think, Garrod, to fine point, it's not about being better, everyone. It's not about being better than yesterday. It's about just doing something different. Just do something different, a small thing, just one item differently. Then you're developing and improving as a coach, and that'll transfer onto your players as well. On that note, I want to say thank you very much, Garrod, for your interaction and engagement tonight. I really enjoyed being on the webinar with you this evening. And everyone, we're back again in a few weeks' time with our next webinar. Really looking forward. We hope you are enjoying the webinar series that we're doing. All feedback is always welcome. So on that note, I would say thank you very much for your patience and your interaction. And good night, and hopefully we'll see you in the coming weeks' time again. Thank you.